Hi there guys, and welcome to another A-level biology video. I'm Mr. Phillips, and today we're looking at year 13 or A2 biology, and that is populations and ecosystems. I'm going to introduce the module now looking at the key terms, niche, what are niches, and competition and adaptations. So there's lots of terms that you need for this module, and it's worth you trying to make sure you understand to start off with. So I'd advise you just press pause here and just see if you can match up the key terms with the actual definitions. Okay, so let's have a look at the answers then. So this is then a list of definitions that is worth you learning to consider with other modules. This could easily link in with an exam. So if we look up, then we go with the niche, which is the red one. A niche is a position occupied by an organism in a particular ecosystem dependent on the resources it uses. It's basically the role the organism plays within the ecosystem. Okay, next one, a species. A species is a group of organisms with similar morphology and physiology, and the effect is they're able to breed within them to make fertile offspring. Whereas if you're not the same organism, the same species, sorry, you'd make infertile offspring. A habitat in green is where an organism lives, as different species have different needs. They'll live in different habitats which fulfill their needs. A population is a group of organisms of the same species which live in the same place at the same time. An ecosystem is a self-contained system including all the organisms and their environments interacting with each other. It's not just a place, but where everything interacts with it, and we'll talk about it in a few moments. And the community is the populations, is where a population is one species in one place at the same time, but whereas a population is one species, all of the organisms interacting is the community. So then what do we need to know? We need to remember that term ecosystem. So think about an ecosystem as this picture here. You've got all the different species, but also you've got the temperature, you've got the amount of sunlight, you've got the soil pH, all those things sort of interact. So an ecosystem is the interaction of a community of living organisms, the biotic parts of the community, the ecosystem, and how they live with the non-living parts, so the abiotic parts. So to survive and reproduce, all animals must, as you know, have a constant supply of materials from their surroundings and other organisms. So we need food, we need water, we need temperature, we need sunlight for the plants, and that all those things come together to make the ecosystem. Now, when we're talking about this module, a lot of times we'll keep coming back to biotic factors. So biotic factors are the living factors that may affect populations. So think about this, these factors could be a new food source being introduced, so we could plant a new crop, for example. It could be a new animal comes in that could be something you could eat. It could be the removal of a food source, so one species goes extinct, it could affect the other species. It could be a new predator, okay, so a new predator could come in. It could be a new pathogen, so a disease obviously is caused by a bacteria or fungus, is definitely a living thing, virus you could argue. A new competitor coming in, so such as introducing the grey squirrel in the UK, all those things are living things which then affect the different species. Now, because of these things, distribution of living things are not constant, and other things that affect that, and particularly the distribution, is abiotic or physical factors, or sometimes called physiochemical factors. So temperature would be an example of abiotic factor because it's non-living but it affects us. Light intensity, particularly with plants. Nutrient availability, so the nutrients in the soil aren't living but they're in the soil and they're vital for the plants. Moisture levels, oxygen levels, carbon dioxide levels, wind strength, wind direction, soil pH. So loads and loads of things that affect where an organism lives. Now the term niche is effectively the role a species plays within its habitat, and it includes both biotic interactions, so it could be the food that the organism eats as part of its niche, and it could be abiotic interactions, so for example the time of day it's active. So you could have the same species of bird, for example, but one of them's active during the day, sorry, two different species of birds, and they eat the same prey, but if one of them's active during the day and one of them's active during the night, they'll have a different niche as a result. So here you've got like a picture that shows the fundamental niche would be like the whole tree, but actually the realized niche would be the different areas of the tree where the birds live. And two species cannot cope and occupy one exactly the same niche or very, very similar niches. If they do, they'll start competing with each other and they'll both lower in numbers, but one of them will eventually be outcompeted and only one of them will survive in that niche. So an example of this, because species can have very, very similar niches, is the pipistrelle bat. And there's the common pipistrelle bat and the soprano one. And basically, if you look at their niches, they're very, very similar. They have been in woodlands, they both hunt insects. They've got slightly different areas they work at, but the difference, real one, is that the echolocation. So they catch different insects because they use different echolocation frequencies, and therefore they don't actually compete against each other. So then we need to know about the term adaptations. Now, adaptations are words that you should have learnt in year 1, linking to evolution and natural selection, and this obviously really does. So when we talk about adaptations, we've got to remember that this helps. Adaptations are a feature of a species that helps increase their chance of survival and reproduction. And there are 3 types of adaptations. There's physiological, behavioural, and anatomical. So physiological maybe something along the lines of a process that species does. So for example, it might make the snake here, might make venom, so that's a physiological process. Behavioural might be the fact that it stands up like that to scare off potential predators, or or to spit the venom into the eyes of potential prey. Whereas an anatomical will be something to do with its actual anatomy. So for example, the fangs will allow it to spit the venom. Now, organisms that are better adapted and have the better adaptations are more likely to survive. They get those adaptations due to mutations, causing mutation of the gene, creating a new advantageous allele. And that allele gives them more likely to survive, which means they can pass on that gene or that allele onto their offspring. And the frequency over population increases over time, and that more key adaptation is therefore more representative. So this is an example of natural selection. So for example, the cobras that could spit the venom more accurately, that allele to give those alleles that give them that benefit being able to do that are more likely to be passed on, because those cobras are more likely to survive than the ones that don't. And that is all part of natural selection, which you can look back at my early videos on where we've done that earlier on in the course. So just to remind you about that though, this is a natural selection question pertaining to the natural selection of a giraffe. And just to remind you, you always answer the question about natural selection in the same way. So it's always like a 6 point. So you always talk about the fact that it is natural selection if they haven't mentioned that in the exam. Then you talk about the fact that a species always show a wide range of phenotypic variation in a population. This is due to mutations that give rise to new alleles. If an allele is particularly advantageous, those individuals with that allele are more likely to survive and successfully and breed as a result, so survival of the fittest. That means that then, I should say allele rather than gene, so apologise about that. That means that that allele enables the survival, and then they're passed on to the next generation. And then over a long period of time, that allows the species to survive, and the allele increases. Now, the last thing is then we've got to obviously be able to adapt to certain situations. So here's a good example of an adaptation to cope with abiotic and biotic factors. So here you can see a mutualistic relationship between sharks and groper fish, and basically the fish are there and they've adapted, the sharks have, to form this relationship with the fish. So the fish do not get attacked by the sharks. Obviously the sharks will very quickly easily eat those fish, but the fish literally live on the surface of the sharks and they eat the parasites that grow on the sharks. So they're controlling that biotic factor for the sharks. In return, the fish obviously get food. So you can see here on this sand tiger shark that the shark, there's actually got fish in the shark's mouth there, going between the shark's teeth to help it survive. Okay, and that is a key adaptation to biotic factors, that the sharks, if they ate the fish obviously wouldn't stay around to do that. And here on a great white shark, you've got a fish on the nose of the shark, and again doing the same principle there. So that's been useful for you guys, and again I'll see you again soon.